channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and all around the world. This is Mark Dolan tonight. With me, Patrick Christie's in for the big man. And in my big opinion, with the number of channel crossings hitting 100,000, are we being lied to about the definition of a refugee? I also have a shocking news story to bring you about the scale of which we are failing to deal with this migrant crisis. But in my take at 10, virtue signalling hits a new peak as the Premier League announced that players will take the knee yet again in some games this season. I am joined by former Tory and UKIP MP Douglas Carswell to dissect the big stories that really matter to you. And my newsmaker tonight is the renowned YouTuber and political commentator. It is Mayor Tuzi. Look, there is absolutely loads on tonight, and it's a busy couple of hours to come. So put something cold and fizzy in the fridge, fire up the kettle, get absolutely legless for all I care. It is Friday night after all. But right now, it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you very much, and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Home Secretary was warned that holding migrants on the Bibby Stockholm barge was a huge health and safety risk. The Fire Brigades Union says it wrote to Suella Braverman more than a week ago but hasn't received a response. All 39 migrants on the barge were removed this afternoon after Legionella bacteria was found in the water. The bacteria can cause a serious type of lung infection known as Legionnaire's disease. The RMT union has announced fresh strikes for around 20,000 of its members. RMT workers at 14 train operators will walk out on the 26th of August and the 2nd of September. That's part of their ongoing dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The union says it's been left with little choice but to take the further action, as it's seen no improved or revised offer from the rail delivery group. The Health Secretary says the latest four-day strike by junior doctors, which started today, serves only to harm patients. Protesters have been gathering outside Downing Street this evening. It's the fifth time they've staged a walkout this year in their ongoing dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says it's been left with no choice. According to the NHS, almost 835,000 appointments have been postponed since industrial action began in December. Now, West Yorkshire Police says the autistic girl arrested by police for making an alleged homophobic remark will face no further action. A warning some viewers may find the following footage distressing. Well, she's now been released, but this video circulating on TikTok shows a 16-year-old autistic girl being detained by 7 officers outside of her home in Leeds. It prompted a complaint. It's understood she told her mother that one of the police officers looked like her grandmother, who's a lesbian. The teenager had been arrested on suspicion of a homophobic public order offence, but the force says it will take on board any lessons to be learned after the footage went viral. A US judge has warned Donald Trump not to make inflammatory statements about the 2020 election case. The federal judge gave the former US president leeway to publicly share some non-sensitive evidence that will be used in his trial on charges of plotting to overturn the 2020 presidential election. But the judge also since made the protective order warning. Well, Trump's attorneys argue the scope of the order is too broad and affects his free speech rights. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight with me, Patrick Christie's In My Big Opinion. This week, migrant channel crossings is a staggering 100,000 since 2018. But have we been lied to about the very definition of what a refugee really is? In the big story, with the government's plans to tackle the crisis making seemingly very little progress, has this now become an invasion? Should we be worried about the impact on our values and on our culture, especially towards women? I'm joined by former government special advisor James Price. I will also be joined by the former Conservative and UKIP MP, the great Douglas Carswell, to discuss everything from Kellogg's, believe it or not, to taking the knee. And in my hot take at 10, virtue signalling hits a new peak, as the Premier League announced that players will indeed be taking the knee in some games this season. It's all very weird. I'll be explaining all later. And tonight's newsmaker is the renowned YouTuber and political commentator, the one and only Maya Tuzi, who will be giving us his 2 cents on this young autistic girl arrested for mildly offending a police officer, and the latest walkout as well by junior doctors. Do you think that is costing lives? Should they be banned from striking? Strong views on either side of that. GB News is the home of the papers as well, with tomorrow's front pages from 10:30. Now, with 3 top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who do not follow the script. Tonight we have author and journalist Emma Wolfe. We also have political and social commentator Lynn May, and we have GB News contributor and fan favourite Albi Amagona as well. Now tonight I will be asking the pundits, with crowds and crowds of antisocial behaviour descending on Oxford Street, those young feral youths, and spreading out as well to other parts of the country, is this disorder now the result of the breakdown of the traditional nuclear family? And with GB News delving into B Corps application processes and criteria for staff, are our big institutions being infiltrated by leftists and wokery? Plus, of course, your emails. This show really is all about you. We especially like the spicy ones, so get them in. gbviews@gbnews.com. This show has a golden rule. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's get to work, and we start, of course, with my big opinion. Well, our approach to the migrant crisis is so shambolic, it almost feels deliberate, doesn't it? The latest scandal in the last couple of hours, believe it or not, is this. An organised crime gang has broken into an airfield and stolen information and evidence of people smuggling operations across the Channel. Yeah. Apparently, a hard drive was stolen from a safe, and they managed to break in simply by cutting a hole in some tarpaulin at Lydd Airfield. I mean, it was hardly Fort Knox, was it? For goodness sake. We can't even keep safe the information that we hold about people who are not keeping our borders safe. You just couldn't make it up. That's after it emerged today that after struggling to find 39 people out of the 170,000 people currently on our asylum seeker backlog waiting list to get on that Bibby Stockholm barge, well, we've now had to evacuate them all because Legionnaires has been detected in the water system. Yesterday, we welcomed our 100,000th Channel migrants on a record day of crossings that saw about 750 new arrivals, a multi-million-pound drone crashed into the water, and a Border Force boat broke down. The biggest joke of all, though, I think, is that we are going to all of this effort, all of this expense, all of this aggro, the nation tearing itself apart over the Channel migrant crisis, when the entire premise of it is wrong as well. It seems to me that this whole thing would fall apart if more people just admitted that vast swathes of people are just economic migrants. So look, check this guy out. This is on BBC Newsnight. They spoke to a bloke, apparently from the Gambia, about why he decided to come all the way to Britain via the Channel.
That's my country, the Gambia, because I felt that I could not realize my dream there. At the same time, I was going to school, but at a certain point, I became a dropout because education in Africa, especially in Gambia, it's very expensive. So I left my country in order to pursue for higher education.
Well, that is economic migration, isn't it? Now, I'm not knocking it, OK? I would probably do the same if I was from the Gambia. But all this effort, taxpayers' money, this whole nightmare is based on the premise that people coming across the Channel are actually asylum seekers, and that is, at best, very questionable, and at worst, a complete lie. We are just living a lie. aren't we, I think? Lies on top of lies. That these people all need salvation, that a barge or Rwanda will actually act as a deterrent, that we're doing all we can to stop this, that lawyers don't have a political and money-making agenda to keep this migrant crisis going. I don't know about you, OK? But I am just sick of the whole bloody thing. Well, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? GBviews at gbnews.com. I'll get to the emails a little bit later after the break. Now, reacting to my big opinion on my brilliant pundits, author and journalist Emma Wolfe, we've got political and social commentator Lynn May, and we've got GB News contributor Albie Amankona. Where to start? Emma, I will start with you. It is now just an absolute circus. Completely and utterly. It's a farce. It's like Fawlty Towers. It's carry on up the channel. It's all of that, isn't it?
It's ludicrous. If the economy doesn't sink this government, then migration will. And as a writer, I try not to use the same words, you know, more than once, but I think you said it, shambolic. Shambolic is the word that I have literally been using about this farce for weeks now. We're just not being clear. The Bibi Stockholm is a complete farce. It's not even going to house, even if it wasn't overrun by Legionellas, it wouldn't even house pretty much the entire influx from yesterday, for example.
We'd be 250 over.
Yeah, exactly. That's not working. That is a panicky, reactive response to a problem which goes way, way back, which successive governments have failed to grasp. And we need to get to the root of this problem in a far more fundamental sense.
I'll bring you in now, Lynn. What do you reckon to this, then? Do you think that there is actually any way, or have you just given up?
See, I do echo yourself. It's an absolute circus. But I would say, and I'm in no way in support of this government dealing with a multitude of issues, especially migration, but the thing is, I do get a sense of they are trying different things. And I think it's so easy for us to have all these criticisms towards the government. You know, they're trying to ensure that our taxpayers' money is not being spent, 6 million every day in hotels. OK, they've looked at an alternative. There's hiccups. There's always going to be hiccups. And my suggestion would be, or question to other people is, OK, what else is there to do?
OK. Albie, what do you make of this? Because I think a lot of people just think, let's just roll over, think of England and watch it fade away.
Well, I'm just glad you didn't ask me what else is there to do, because honestly, I'm not sure anyone knows what else we can do.
Because I was going to ask you this, right? Safe and legal routes. Yeah. This is getting wheeled out all the time.
Yeah.
And part of me now, and this may well be controversial to people, part of me is thinking, I mean, how much worse could safe and legal routes really be?
I think the whole point of safe and legal routes, the way that it would work, in my mind at least, is if you have a strong deterrent, so that would be Rwanda, and then safe and legal routes, which would allow people to come over legally, so that therefore you're truly breaking the business model and stopping people from crossing the channel. I think that's the idea behind safe and legal routes.
One of the things that really got me was that we actually managed to allow an organised crime gang to break in to an airfield where we keep drones, planes and the information that we possess about the human trafficking gangs in supposedly a locked safe that is contained itself within basically just a tent, and for them to nick it. Exactly. I mean, that sums it up, doesn't it?
And there are things that we could do that aren't just about pushing the boats back, which is ludicrous. You can't capsize boats and let people die in the water. You can't do that.
No.
You need to deal with the problem much further back, where it starts. You need to break the business model, as Albie says. You don't just respond by putting floating barges around our country. That's not the way to do it. You need
especially not these ones, because apparently they've all got diseases on them.
They're all overrun with diseases. But I think the problem, and Lynn, and the real problem is, yes, the government are trying to do something, but they are at war with themselves. Suella Braverman's, all her attempts have been foiled and prevented. Therefore, they can't get anything through because they're fighting. They're all the infighting that is going on. There is no concerted, joined-up thinking on this.
But when you say, break the business model, I used to work with a caseload of Eritreans that came over, and they said the problem actually starts with people smugglers, traffickers coming to their towns saying the streets will be paved with gold once you come here. They show them Instagram saying you're going to get these women, you're going to get... And how...
And the UK is an attractive country. We have a very generous benefit system. We have excellent education. We have a lot of employment. We have social housing.
But
we are an attractive place to
on the
come.
head there, which is that clearly there is the message being pumped out there that Britain is a land of milk and honey.
It's all over TikTok.
But the problem I would have with that is every time we try to introduce something that remotely looks like a deterrent, we can't do it. So it is a land of milk and honey.
But Patrick, you said yourself actually that if you were from the Gambia, you'd probably try and move here too. I think there's nothing that can stop. There's nothing that can stop that human impulse to move to get a better life, and that's what we're fighting against.
Yeah, we are, and I get that there is that human impulse, absolutely. The thing is, if we flipped it on its head, OK, and we did some kind of Newsnight interview, where Newsnight interviewed me, and they said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't think I've got anything for my life here in Britain, so I'm just going to rock up in Germany and live at the taxpayer's expense and then refuse to leave. I think BBC Newsnight would probably call me an illegal immigrant. But they don't tend to do that with some of the...
No, but what frustrates me is we have loads of, let's say, partnerships or even aid that we provide these countries, and we are not putting pressure on the government to look after their citizens better. Leaders, politicians, they send their children here to school, they use our hospital services, our NHS, so on and so forth, or private services, but then when it comes to looking after their citizens, we're not encouraging them to do that. That's why they come here.
But what pressure could you put on the government of a third world country to look after their people?
Where does this aid go?
What is that?
Where does the aid go?
What is putting pressure on the Gambian government?
Working with them, talking to them, talking to our European allies.
What does it look like?
OK, you're no longer going to receive aid if you cannot assist
can I just
your own
think, you know what it could
citizens.
look like? Genuinely, you know what it could look like is flying planes full of their citizens back over and leaving them at the airport. But we will return to this story. We'll return to this story later. But coming up in the big story, with the migrant crisis showing no sign of subsiding and with record numbers crossing the channel, has it turned into an invasion of people who thought that what Suella Braverman was saying was a bit fruity and a bit wrong? Have they changed now? I'll be joined by veteran former government special advisor James Price. I will see you in just a couple of seconds. Stay tuned.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Your views have been flooding in. Time for a couple of them now. Claire's been on. Thank you, Claire. We only have one option left, and that is to tow the boat straight back before they land. Look, Claire, this has been put out there a few times. Do you remember the days of the old wave machine as well? We were thinking about putting a wave machine in the channel. People laughed at that initially at the time, didn't they? I wonder how many people are being in favour of it now. Graham says, migration totally out of control. The left run this country. The only way we have a chance of getting this sorted is to leave the ECHR. That's interesting, though, because a lot of people don't want to leave the ECHR. I'd be bang up for it. I thought it was a prerequisite of us voting for Brexit, to be perfectly honest with you, Graham. And, Graham, you mentioned a point that I'm going to return to a little bit later on, actually, which is about whether or not various different institutions have been infiltrated by politically motivated factions who do not have, I would argue, the will of this country and our democratically elected government's policies at their heart. But we know about these relentless channel crossings, OK? Yesterday, like I said, 755 individuals detected on our shores. We all know about the fact that now it's hit 100,000 since 2018. But what doesn't get spoken about enough for me is the potential cultural implications of this. So the public have major concerns about the economy, yeah, fine, housing, safety, crime, the use of taxpayers' money. We all know about all of this. But with so many people, mostly young men, coming from countries with very different values, some would argue morals, cultures, should this also be a cause for concern? I'm asking a simple question. Do you think that women are more or less safe on the streets as a result of mass illegal immigration? Has this uncontrolled influx now become an invasion? I'm joined by former government special advisor James Price, a fabulous addition to indeed this show and any other one as well. James, has it become an invasion?
Thank you so much for having me. Good evening. I think invasion is obviously a word that implies that there is some kind of deep motive that is being controlled from some central point. I think the real nub here, the problem, is that the policymakers in Whitehall, in the Home Office and wherever else, they're very poor at being able to tackle the sorts of questions that you're asking about. Questions about culture, questions about morality, questions about religion, perhaps. These are very, very difficult things, especially in our slightly morally straitened times when people rightly don't want to cause offence. They get very nervous about causing offence, but it makes it very difficult for policymakers to be able to factor these sorts of things in. You've got the Office for Budget Responsibility, which is an independent marker that rightly can hold government to account. It says immigration is a wonderful thing. Lots of new young people coming in who will contribute to the workforce and taxes and all these sorts of things. But there's no real marker, as you say, that will work out cultural issues, religious issues for good or for ill.
But is it not common sense? I mean, if you have a lot of young men from countries where they treat women very, very differently, where they treat gay people very, very differently, and where there is a different moral compass, I suppose you could argue, and then there is no pressure on them to integrate whatsoever, we are going to end up with those problems in Britain, aren't we? And shouldn't that be a cause for concern?
I think we can take this as a ratcheting effect. If you introduce an awful lot of one set of demographics, no matter who they are or what they will be, that will create some kind of imbalance. In this case, exactly as you say, lots of young men. Well, that means that there are maybe not as many future partners for them as they might like, and that can cause some problems. You see that happening in China as a result of the one-child policy. You can see this as a result of wars historically. Ratcheted up again, as you say, if there are people who have different cultural mores, that can be a challenge if you don't have a very activist policy of helping people integrate, of learning what it is that makes this country so tolerant and so wonderful and so great. And the problem is that we haven't really seen an awful lot of those kinds of policies even be attempted by central Whitehall and Westminster. And when you ally that to the fact that, take in the Home Office, we've had these stories that lots of civil servants are saying, I think this is really mean and immoral and I'm not going to do it, then it makes it even more difficult for the democratically elected government to try and pursue any of those ends at all.
But is this not a Europe-wide problem? I can't help but feel as though my future children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren will look back and scratch their heads and wonder why the people of Europe decided that their culture was not worth preserving.
Yeah, and this is something that we're not comfortable talking about. You know, I like to watch on GB News, and we talk about how great Britain is, Europe as well. You know, maybe with the exception of the French. You know, we're very happy to talk about some of the wonders of European civilization and culture and the wonderful things they've given the world. I think what we might end up seeing is that continental Europe will start doing a lot of things to stem migration flows that we in Britain, who have been more heavily influenced perhaps by American liberalism, will start to find very unpleasant. And you might even see in 10 years' time that the campaign to rejoin the EU will suddenly become a right-wing issue rather than a left-wing one.
Fascinating point.
Do you imagine?
That is a really good point, and I'm glad you've raised it, because we know that border security, since we voted for Brexit, has got worse, basically, hasn't it, really? We have decided, as far as I can tell, to adopt almost none of the benefits that we could have done in the wake of the Brexit referendum. Deliberately so, remarkably so, stupidly so, in my view. We are waiting, I think, for the Italians, for the French, for the Germans, for a few other nations, the Greeks maybe, to act hardcore against what's going on. And then we will do it, as opposed to us just taking the lead. And I find that staggering. What are we so scared of? Why are we so afraid of standing alone and doing what's in our own best interest?
I think it's a really great question. And I think, again, when you look at the British population, every time Red Nose Day, Children in Need comes along, we dig deep in our pockets. Look at what's happened with Ukraine, the visa scheme. You know, at the moment, the place I work, we've hired a young Ukrainian who came over on the visa scheme. Incredibly impressive person. Obviously, she's here to be kept safe from the horrible war. But every young, economically active chap who comes over on a small boat takes up resources and space, especially with the housing crisis we have at the moment, and frankly saps away some of the goodwill that could be being spent on either this girl or any other person who is either in massive need or perhaps the best and the brightest. And we can't take everybody into the world. Britain can't be the only place where people go to realize their dreams. You can't derive an ought from an is, as David Hume once said. And I think you're right. I think there is a fundamental problem. How you get to address it requires a change in the civil services culture, ironically, about the way that they look at culture.
Yes, actually, very well put. James, thank you very much. An absolute pleasure. That's James Price, there, is a former government special advisor. I think some people maybe need to hold a bit of a mirror up to themselves. And when things happen, like we had recently in Sudan, and no doubt there will be another conflict that breaks out in another country where there are British citizens as well as very genuine refugees, and people stand up in the House of Lords and they say, why aren't we doing more? We get certain commentators, Britain should be doing more on this. And you may well be right. That may well be an issue where we should be doing more on. But the question of why we're not may well have a lot to do with what we are already doing, needlessly so, a waste of resources, some would say, in certain other aspects of our society. If you disagree with me, of course, make sure that you do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. I go to the emails a lot throughout the course of the show. We're veering away from the migrant crisis now, everybody. We're very pleased to know. Coming up next, with the pundits, this is fascinating. So the large-scale antisocial behaviour that we saw in London on Oxford Street recently, a load of young people just going absolutely feral. That, by the way, will no doubt be happening at a town or a city near you soon. I wonder, though, with all of this, is it just a lack of respect for law and order? I'm not sure. I think it's the result of the breakdown of the conventional family. So I'm going to be getting stuck into that with my pundits in just a tick. I will see you in 3, but right now, it's your weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst, and looking at the weekend, be summarised by sunshine and scattered showers, particularly heavy on Saturday. And looking at the bigger picture, we can see why this area of low pressure moves in for the weekend, increasing the wind strengths, increasing the risk of showers across the north and the west in particular. Out there through the rest of Friday evening, not too bad. There'll be some clear spells before dusk, and then overnight we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, which could be heavy at times. Temperatures generally a little lower than recent nights, so a little more comfortable for sleeping, but still 14 or 15 for many to start Saturday morning. Better the sunshine first thing across eastern parts of England, northeast Scotland. But these bands of rain slowly push their way eastwards through the day as the area of low pressure pushes in from the Atlantic. Some of this rain could be heavy and perhaps thundery at times across northern England, but there will be some sunny spells in between, and that will lift temperatures to around 23 degrees towards the southeast. Breezier conditions towards the northwest here, 20 or 21 as a maximum temperature. Into Sunday, low pressure still in charge. The winds do ease and there will be less showers around, but fairly cloudy picture. Some bright or sunny spells, a scattering of showers, and temperatures once again reaching the high teens to low 20s. Into the beginning of next week, it stays unsettled. Further rain on Monday, but signs of something drier and brighter by Tuesday.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hey, right, OK. Now, joining me throughout the course of this show are author and journalist, the wonderful Emma Wolfe, political and social commentator Lynn Mai, and GB News contributor Albie Amankona, and presenter as well, why not, you know? Anyway, so, look, our very own Nigel Farage yesterday spoke about woke quotas as B Corp, which I forgive you for maybe having never heard of. I hadn't have heard of it either. But it's uncovered as yet another organisation encouraging companies to tick boxes in the spirit of being woke. More than that, though, really. Is this a leftist infiltration of our institutions? Emma, I will start with you. For a lot of people, they'd always have that kind of joke, really, I think, which was that, oh, they're not going to employ you because you're a straight white man. And now it actually looks like they might not employ you because you're a straight white man.
Yeah. You know what? I think this is deeply patronising and utterly kind of infantilising. We don't need this kind of box ticking. I don't need rainbows on every shop window or every street crossing. I don't need what are we so scared of? Why are we so scared of causing offence at the moment? Why don't we just stand up and say what we believe? Why don't we just treat people with respect? What is all this nonsense about diversity and inclusion, which is about saying, have you got lots of LGBT people at the top of your organisation? Okay. And then getting scored on it.
All right. Is it nonsense?
No, I wouldn't say it's completely nonsense, because I think this is the fault of the country initially. If we look at, let's say, for example, minority groups, when David Cameron actually had this looked into, people with, let's say, a foreign name, mainly Asian and African, even though they had many of the credentials, they were held back. And if we look at, let's say, middle-class white people, they've benefited from nepotism, where they may not be good at the job, but because mummy and daddy know someone, a CEO, they get the job.
With respect, is that not the same in countries like Nigeria, for example?
The opportunity, as we know, Britain has decimated many countries in the Middle East and in Africa. So, no, they're not going to get the same opportunities as they would here. So I think it shouldn't go on indefinitely. I think we're doing too much now. However, when we first started to look at diversity, I don't think it's all bad, for the simple fact that if I have the credentials, because my name is a foreign name, I shouldn't be overlooked.
Interesting. Albie, what about completely blind job applications? Does that not solve everything? There's no name on any job application whatsoever. We all just, submit it with a number or something.
Yeah, I think blind CVs are a really good idea, but it's not actually just about the name which is off a blind CV. It's also things like where you went to university. Of course, it's not just about race and gender. It's also about class. And what you find is that people who went to certain universities, just by virtue of going to Oxford or Cambridge or LSE or whichever Russell Group university it is, are more likely to get a job than someone that might have gone to an ex-polytechnic, for example, or someone that has done a technical...
I get what you mean, but is that not actually just a sign, a way that we as human beings decipher who is more intelligent than somebody else? We have to have some mark.
No, that's simply not true.
Have you never met private school kids that went to Oxford? Come on, they exist.
I've met some idiots that's gone to Oxford.
So you can't always just say, oh, well, this person has gone to Oxford and done PPE, and therefore they are qualified at the job. Look at Boris Johnson, for goodness sake. We've got a whole...
That's going to go down like a cup of cold sick,
and we also know that parents also can pay their way for their child to get into certain schools.
Yeah, but there's also an assumption that if you're white and middle class, that you are, bank of mum and dad, and that you've had
I don't think there's
privileges all the way through your life.
There's an assumption that if you're black, you're going to be lazy, you're not going to be on time. There are assumptions everywhere, which is why, actually, I think the blind CVs are a good idea. The box ticking is too much.
It's too much. I've got to say, they're visually impaired CVs these days, Albert. Well, you can't possibly say blind CVs, unfortunately, but I do get what you mean.
But the idea that all diversity and inclusion is useless and pointless...
But I agree, it's getting insulting.
It's getting insulting. I agree with what Lynn May says, absolutely, about it being necessary in the beginning.
Yeah.
And just to try and include more... Just to try and include more different types of people, of different races, of different gender, whatever. But you don't need to talk about the sexuality of your employees in order to tick boxes to get the point.
And it is. If you're being, if the worth of your company or how good at your job you are, or the service that you provide is based singly around how many people of a particular demographic you employ. I mean, for me, that's just bonkers. It's got to be actually what you're doing. But I want to talk to you about this. It's an interesting dimension to this story now. So social media has been blamed as the source for a rise in shoplifting in Oxford Street this week. But it's not just London. I'm sure anyone who's living in any town or city will have probably seen a rise in things like petty theft, etc. So West End stores, though, were forced to lower their shutters and lock customers inside during an incident sparked by a TikTok post. However, social media cannot be wholly to blame for me, because I could have seen this when I was growing up. I dare say a lot of people would have done as well, and not acted on it. You're not compelled to act on this stuff. I wouldn't have done that, A, because I didn't really want to, B, because I would have been afraid to get caught, but C, because I would have been too afraid of what my parents would have said when I got caught. And I thought, do those people there, those kids, not care about that? What is their home life like? Could it be down to the breakdown of a traditional nuclear family? Emma?
I really object, Patrick. I mostly agree with you, but I really object to this, and I'm sorry to bring myself into this. I am a single mother. I have a baby boy. This use of the word nuclear, I'm bringing him up with respect, with values, with an impeccable, beautiful manners, with please and thank you, with boundaries, with discipline, with no television. I am bringing up a little citizen into the world, nothing to do with the conventional family. I'm a single mother, which has a kind of taint and a whiff to it.
Is the father not in your son's life? If you don't mind me answering.
Well, I do mind you asking. I agree. It's about the breakdown of society and things like that. This invasion. I think it's more to do with kids, young people, no youth clubs, bored as hell, sitting in their rooms, staring at mobile phones for 10 hours in darkened bedrooms.
Go on, Albie.
I don't really buy this whole, oh, well, if these kids have a youth club with a ping pong table, they wouldn't be taking part in this crime.
Something to do.
And also, I'll bring myself into it. I'm from a black single-parent household, and we have some of the worst outcomes in the entire country. And I do actually think that some of this does come from the fact that some of these people, and a lot of them are black people, are coming from fatherless households with not proper discipline. That is not to say that single mothers can't do an amazing job. My mother did an amazing job. Emma, with Ludo, is doing an amazing job. But unfortunately, not enough are. And there's too much tolerance, in my opinion, of deadbeat dads in some communities.
Yeah, that's why I apologise if you found it. But what I wanted to get at mainly was, I think the word nuclear means you have to have a mother and father in the household, which I think is better, but there are toxic situations where there is a nuclear family and the outcome is not positive.
That's very true.
What I was more aiming at is fathers being a part of the children's life. And if you look at Caribbean statistics specifically, I don't know the makeup, but as you said,
I mean,
when we've seen the video, sadly, the majority are black children. And if you look at the stats of absent fathers within the home of Caribbean households, British black Caribbean, it's extremely low.
Right, so should we stigmatise absent fathers more than we do? Should we shame...
Stigmatise the fathers, not the mothers. And I think where society has got it wrong is that the stigma is attached to the mother because she's the one that turns up at school on her own. So she's the one that society looks at and says, she's done something wrong, whereas the fathers aren't there. There's too much tolerance of absent fathers and there's too much stigma attached to single mothers.
OK, Emma, I'm going to ask you about this now, though. Do you think that parents now are actually scared of their own kids?
I think that we have, as a society, I think we have a problem with discipline and boundaries and saying, no, that is not acceptable, that is not acceptable. We have a problem with violence, It's scary to say to a kid on the bus, you know, can you turn that down?
Yeah.
Can you shut up? Because you might get... We have a problem with knife crime in London and probably around the country. So I think there's a problem with just saying, actually, that's not acceptable. And this goes back to the wokery thing, where everything is OK. It's absolutely fine for your child to say that they're a dinosaur at the age of 3 and they want to self-identify as a girl, instead of saying, no, actually, you're a boy, but it's fine. If you want to dress up in a dress, that's fine. But you're not socially transitioning. No, you're not. You know, we have a problem with just being parents, with being grown-ups.
I think it's social media as well, though. That's the main issue. I think when it comes to how they were galvanised, these group of children, they saw this. And I think the problem is, like, when I was growing up, I couldn't even bring an item of clothing without my father saying, what house did that come from? We're driving back to that person's house and giving it. Now, parents are so consumed with trying to also be engrossed in social media, they're not seeing what's going on in their children's life as much. When I work with families, I'm like, OK, so did you sit down with your child to understand what he's doing? And no, there's no collaborative working within the household to know what your child is up to.
But that's about a good, healthy family and good, healthy parenting. That's not about having a father and a mother in a perfect 2.4. Do you know what I mean?
True.
I think that we obsess a little bit about fathers.
You need to have a father. There's so many statistics that show children do better when fathers and mothers are in a child's life.
I think that children do well when they're in a happy, healthy household. I've thought a lot about this.
Yeah.
And I think that being in an unhappy, mother-father household is probably just as
No,
bad.
I agree, but the
as being-
stats still support they need both parents.
Look, it's obviously a fascinating discussion, so thank you very much for that. It was an incredibly lively chat, actually. Coming up next, former Conservative and UKIP MEP Douglas Carswell gives us his 2 cents on the latest instalment in the Wokery Chronicles. I will see you very, very shortly. Don't you dare move.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Before we crack on, I want to hear from you. Robert's been on. Thank you very much. Patrick, I worked in the prison service for 30 years. Well done. The last 5 years, we were pressured to promote people based upon race rather than ability to do the job. We were and still do tick the box. Interesting. Maria says, I put the antisocial behaviour by the youth of today to the fact that discipline in the homes and schools was brought to a great halt some years ago, reacting, of course, to the conversation, great chat that we just had in relation to what's actually causing feral youths. Does it start in the home? Is it social media, etc.? But anyway, the show must go on, and indeed it does, because a US conservative legal group, you might want to just sit down for this, has urged an anti-discriminatory agency to investigate cereal company Kellogg's. America First Legal has accused Kellogg's of having an unlawful workplace and of sexualising its products. Our cereal's gone sexy. For Pride Month, a box of Cheez-It crackers was released, featuring drag queen RuPaul on the cover, as well as cereal boxes visibly celebrating LGBTQ+ Pride Month on the packaging. Iconic character Tony the Tiger also recently posed for a photo with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney. You could argue, of course, that's 2 men in costume, at the Tony Awards in June. In the UK, it has been announced that footballers will continue to take the knee as well before some football matches this season. Football captains have said that they are unified in the belief that discrimination has no place in football or wider society. So, a couple of wokey stories for you there. Has the woke agenda finally gone completely barking mad? Joining me this evening from across the pond is the former politician, full-time legend, Douglas Carswell. Douglas, great stuff. Thank you very much. As I can see, you've got Mississippi in the background. Fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Right, let's start with Kellogg's, which is a phrase I never thought I would say to you. What do you make of this? Are they really aggressively sexualising products aimed at children with LGBTQ stuff?
Well, I'm not sure that America First Legal has got quite the right strategy here. I'm not sure getting a government federal agency to fight this for them is really the way forward. But I think what this does tell us is that in America now there's enormous sensitivity to the woke corporate agenda that there's been. We saw it with Disney, we saw it with Bud Light. There's a real resentment on the part of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans who really don't like seeing woke ideology put on their cereal packets.
OK, why does it matter, though? You know, why does it matter? When I walk around a shop and I'm looking at cereal, which I don't make a habit of doing, the thing that I'm really looking at is the price. I don't really necessarily care whether or not it's got a trans person on it. Or do you just think that it's needless virtue signalling? Is that your main concern?
Well, I think it should be up to the people who own the brand to decide how to market it. I mean, fundamentally, in a free country, if they want to try to sell beer by associating their product with transgenderism or breakfast cereal by embracing woke ideology, great, good on them. But what we're seeing is that the American consumer, in really very large numbers, is turning against this. Look at what happened to Bud Light. They lost hundreds of millions, tens of millions of dollars worth of revenue. I suspect that they won't be the last to fall foul of this.
No.
It's not really a case of trying to prevent companies from marketing things the way they want. What I do think is that companies are becoming very sensitive to the fact that middle America has just had enough of this.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point I was hoping to get out of you there, because clearly, initially, they must have thought that it made good business sense to do woke stuff. And then increasingly, I think people are pushing back on that. We've had Gillette, we've had Bud Light, we've had all sorts, OK? And I think there's a sense of unfairness, especially maybe for a lot of natural-born women who then see men dressed as women getting a variety of different jobs or indeed beating them in some sporting events, which is not particularly nice. I think people also see through the absolute fakery of it, Douglas, and it's on that I want to get you now, which is about Premier League footballers saying they're going to take the knee next season. It's something that started in your neck of the woods now in America, and it's going to continue to happen here 4 years on from George Floyd dying, OK? They don't mean it, do they?
It's ridiculous. The average Premier League footballer, I think, earns £3.6 million a year. The idea that we should take these people seriously as symbols of victimhood and discrimination, people who've been treated unjustly, it's absurd. It's ridiculous. If you're earning over $100,000, £100,000 a year, the idea that you're somehow a victim is nonsense. Look at who our footballers are. Surely, actually, the story of Premier League footballers in this country tells you that we are a meritocracy, that in this country, in Britain, you can get ahead by being talented and hardworking. The idea that you should wrap yourselves up in victimhood is absurd and ridiculous. And I think most people now see it as that.
You know what makes me laugh is that when you go and watch football in the pub and people take the knee, there is usually actually a bit of a ripple of boos. And I don't think that's because people in the pub are racist. It's because they see straight through it. They think this is a pointless virtue signalling gesture that footballers don't mean. And we know they don't mean it because I am convinced, Douglas, that if you gave footballers enough money, they would all go and play in North Korea. They don't really care.
I think there's a lot in what you say. We see footballers quite willing to accept contracts to go and play in countries with very dodgy human rights records like Saudi Arabia. If they were really moral, they would be much more discerning about that. What this is about is embracing a set of virtue signaling propositions that allow them to try to position themselves as elite icons in an age where there's they think there's advantage in doing so. It's not really about helping disadvantaged minority people in inner city Britain.
One quick one, finally, with you, Douglas, is that you, of course, were a Tory, then you were UKIP, and then you decided to move continent. And I'm just wondering, when you look at what's happening with the Channel migrant crisis at the moment, do you think you got out at the right time?
It's insane, isn't it? 100,000 people have crossed the Channel. And who's been in charge for 13 years? They talk now as though they're going to act. They're incapable of governing. They're in office but not in power. They're in government, but they don't know what to do with it. It's extraordinary. It also, I think, shows a moral collapse. What kind of country are you when you can't kick out people who come in illegally? Do you think people going to China illegally or Nigeria illegally would be allowed to stay in those countries? It shows that the United Kingdom is governed by clowns and has had a moral collapse. I think it's profoundly disturbing.
Well, strong stuff. Douglas, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Look after yourself. Douglas Carswell there, former politician, now all the way in Mississippi. Now, on that note, we've asked you a little poll earlier on, at GBNews on Twitter. There'll be another one up in a tick, actually. This question was, have you given up on stopping the boats? Interesting results here. 55% of you say yes. 44% of you say no. I will, a little bit later on, go through some of the comments to that, because I think that is really interesting. 55% of you say you have given up on it. I wonder whether that's down to the fact that you just don't think we're going to do it, as opposed to you rolling over and saying, oh, you know what, let them come. But there we go. Coming up next, in my take at 10, I will have a bit more on this Premier League wokies taking the knee in the new season. I'm going to be getting stuck right into that. And, of course, if you want to tell your friends all about the news tomorrow, but today, then we are the only place to be, because I'll be whizzing you through the front pages. I've had a sneak look at a couple of them, and they are spicy. I'll see you in 3.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst, and looking at the weekend, be summarised by sunshine and scattered showers, particularly heavy on Saturday. And looking at the bigger picture, we can see why this area of low pressure moves in for the weekend, increasing the wind strengths, increasing the risk of showers across the north and the west in particular. Out there through the rest of Friday evening, not too bad. There'll be some clear spells before dusk, and then overnight we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, which could be heavy at times. Temperatures generally a little lower than recent nights, so a little more comfortable for sleeping, but still 14 or 15 for many to start Saturday morning. Better the sunshine first thing across eastern parts of England, northeast Scotland. But these bands of rain slowly push their way eastwards through the day as the area of low pressure pushes in from the Atlantic. Some of this rain could be heavy and perhaps thundery at times across northern England, but there will be some sunny spells in between, and that will lift temperatures to around 23 degrees towards the southeast. Breezier conditions towards the northwest here, 20 or 21 as a maximum temperature. Into Sunday, low pressure still in charge. The winds do ease and there will be less showers around, but fairly cloudy picture. Some bright or sunny spells, a scattering of showers, and temperatures once again reaching the high teens to low 20s. Into the beginning of next week, it stays unsettled. Further rain on Monday, but signs of something drier and brighter by Tuesday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hey, it's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and all around the world. I am Patrick Christie's, and tonight I am identifying as the iconic Mr. Mark Dolan. In my take at 10, virtue signalling hits a new peak as the Premier League announced players will continue to take the knee in some games this season. Tonight's newsmaker is the political YouTuber, legend and commentator Maya Tuzi, and GB News is the home of the papers with tomorrow's front pages from exactly 10:30 p.m. sharp. I get a little sneak peek of them. It's a perk of the job. You are not going to want to miss it. It turns out there really is quite a lot of news out there. Yeah, it's all go in this hour, so put something cold and fizzy in the fridge, fire up the kettle, why not pour yourself an absolutely monumental drink and just say goodbye to what may or may not have been an absolutely terrible week for you. Get leathered. But now it's your headlines with Tatiana.
Patrick, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Home Secretary was warned that holding migrants on the Bibby Stockholm barge was a huge health and safety risk. The Fire Brigades Union says it wrote to Suella Braverman more than a week ago but hasn't received a response. All 39 migrants on the barge were removed this afternoon after Legionella bacteria was found in the water. The bacteria can cause a serious type of lung infection known as Legionnaire's disease. The RMT union has announced fresh strikes for around 20,000 of its members. RMT workers at 14 train operators will walk out on the 26th of August and the 2nd of September. That's part of their ongoing dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The union says it's been left with little choice but to take the further action as it's seen no improved or revised offer from the rail delivery group. The Health Secretary says the latest 4-day strike by junior doctors, which started today, serves only to harm patients. Protesters gathered outside Downing Street earlier today. It's the 5th time they've staged a walkout this year in their ongoing dispute over pay. The British Medical Association says it's been left with no choice. According to the NHS, almost 835,000 appointments have been postponed since the industrial action began in December. West Yorkshire Police says the autistic girl arrested by police for making an alleged homophobic remark will face no further action. A warning some viewers may find the following footage distressing. She's now been released, but this video circulated on TikTok. It shows a 16-year-old autistic girl being detained by 7 officers outside her home in Leeds. Well, that prompted a complaint. It's understood she told her mother that one of the police officers looked like her grandmother, who was a lesbian. The teenager had been arrested on suspicion of a homophobic public order offence. The force has now said it will take on board any lessons to be learned after the footage of the arrest sparked criticism on social media. And finally, a US judge has warned Donald Trump not to make inflammatory statements about the 2020 election case. The federal judge gave the former US president leeway to publicly share some non-sensitive evidence that will be used in his trial on charges of plotting to overturn the 2020 presidential election. But the judge also since made the protective order warning. Well, Trump's attorneys argue that the scope of the order is too broad and affects his free speech rights. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by simply saying play GB News. Now it's over to Patrick.
Well, it's Mark Dolan tonight, but this time it's with me, Patrick Christys. Tonight's newsmaker is the famed political YouTube sensation and political commentator Mayor Tuzi, here to give us his thoughts on a couple of things, one of which is that very controversial video of the autistic girl being arrested, since, by the way, released without charge for mildly insulting a police officer. What has gone wrong with law and order in this country? We have got tomorrow's papers at 10:30 p.m. sharp with a full pundit reaction. You're going to want to watch that. Plus, we will have tonight's headline heroes and back page zeros. Big stories, big guests, always big opinions. Here is my take at 10. Welcome to another season of pathetic virtue signalling in the Premier League. It has been confirmed that players will take the knee during some special fixtures this season in a totally pointless gesture that makes no difference whatsoever, and as far as I can tell, the vast majority of football fans despise and very often actively boo. They will take the knee for the first game, the last game, a couple of designated say no to racism fixtures, and bizarrely, once on Boxing Day. Presumably, racism isn't as much of a problem at other times of the year, but the fact is that if you paid a Premier League footballer enough money, they would happily go back in time and kick a ball about in South Africa during apartheid. If North Korea offered £1 million a week to Premier League players, they would be getting their agents to get them on the first flight to Pyongyang. They don't actually care. They don't give a toss. It's a complete nonsense. I mean, a version of this is already happening. Jordan Henderson making a virtue of being an LGBTQ plus ally and then just going to Saudi Arabia. Pretty sure you can be killed if you're gay in Saudi Arabia. Beaten up, definitely. Stadiums may well have been built by slaves. That is, of course, after we didn't boycott a World Cup in another fundamentalist nation, where stadiums actually were built by slaves, plenty of whom died on the job. Morals in football depend singularly on how much money is on the table. All these players and the clubs who claim to care about taking the knee, putting the rainbow laces on, doing a minute's applause for the NHS or anything else, a moment's silence to remember injustice all around the world. It would all stop tomorrow if there was enough money riding on it. This is why the public boo it, not because they're racist, but because they can just see straight through it. Everyone can see how hollow this gesture is. And people just can't stand fakery. There have been numerous opportunities recently for football to actually take a stand, not a knee, against racism. And they haven't done it. And everyone can see that. So they can jog on. When the referee blows the whistle, stay stood up and try to stick the ball in the back of the net and give the people what they actually flipping want to see. GBViews at gbnews.com. I'll get to your emails after the break. Reacting to my take at 10 tonight are author and journalist Emma Wolfe, GB News contributor Albi Amankona, and political and social commentator Lynn Mai as well. Emma, I'll start with you. Do you think there's any point in footballers taking the knee?
I think it has become a pretty empty gesture, and I wonder if you asked them what they were actually taking the knee about, how many of them would be able to answer that. I mean, look at how few Black Premier League managers there are. I think there's one, is that right?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure about this upcoming season. I've been a bit behind the 8 ball there, but quite possibly.
I believe it's one. So if it's such a diverse and wonderful and open culture, why not be more diverse and inclusive?
OK, I will throw it over to you now, Lynn. I mean, do you care? Do you see it as virtue signalling? Do you think it makes a difference?
I can't believe we're still talking about taking the knee. I do think, I echo, it's absolutely an empty gesture. But I also don't think that we should, if you want to get down on your knee, get down on your knee. I don't think it's something that we should still be talking about. And to be honest, like you said, if they were offered enough, I agree with you. I think they would go to North Korea, just like we're seeing more footballers taking up contracts in Saudi Arabia. And as you know, the human rights there are absolutely horrific. So what is this? Is it just a show for PR?
Well, quite possibly. And Albie, I mean, people boo it. People boo it. And then the sound gets turned down. When you watch Match of the Day, they go, and now the players take the knee. Hey, you'd think they were at Glastonbury. Hey, if you actually turn up, there's a load of people either sitting there in silence or booing.
I've got to be honest, Patrick, I completely disagree with your monologue there. When I was watching the Euro 2020 finals back in 2021, and indeed that entire competition where I think we got to the final, what I heard when people were taking the knee was the crowd roaring with cheers. And what these footballers are doing when they are taking the knee is taking a stand against the racism that they receive every time they play in a football match. You look at their Twitter accounts, littered with bananas, people making racist gestures to them at football games. This is not an empty gesture. If you speak to football players like Raheem Sterling, Jordan Henderson, who you mentioned, they talk about the racism that they suffer as football players, and it's them saying, I'm taking a stand against this. I want the FA to do something about it. And actually, the FA are doing something about it. There's a whole campaign.
Albie, what is taking a knee doing?
There's a whole campaign called the Kick It Out campaign, which got galvanised because taking the knee really became a massive force within sports. And now we're seeing a lot of these schemes which are tackling the issue.
Lynn, go on, I can see you retching.
No, I just don't think taking the knee has actually done anything.
But it literally has.
Anything tangible for racism. I think again, Kick It Out campaign. They've been working tirelessly for a long time. So I don't think it is just taking the knee. I think it's the people on the ground that we don't see that have been working hard. And I agree. I think it's horrific, the racism that footballers have to endure all of the time. But I just don't see taking the knee as doing anything.
I think it's the emptiness of it, right? That's for me. I mean, I don't have a problem with people doing it if people genuinely believe it, but I just really do not think that our footballers actually care. And that is evidenced by the fact that we went and played in Qatar. A load of them are going to Saudi Arabia. A load of them have gone to China previously. I mean, they absolutely would. If you dangled a bag of cash at a Premier League football, who, by the way, is doubly bad, Emma, I think, because they don't need the money. If someone's been playing...
But what I object to is not the fact that they're taking the knee or what it stands for at all. Of course, that's laudable. What I object to is that you sort of have to. You kind of have to now. There's no discussion around it. We're bullied into this kind of... We're bullied into these gestures. It was a bit like...
Who's bullying anyone? They're choosing to take the knee and they're taking it.
We were too scared to say...
If you don't want to take it, you don't...
I don't mind anyone taking the knee.
If you were the only one, Emma, this is the thing, isn't it? If you were the only one on your team who didn't take the knee... It would
but it was a bit like... But it was a bit like if you didn't go on a Thursday night, if you didn't go stand outside your house with your bloody pots and pans and bang away for the NHS heroes, you know, rather than saying there are some amazing people in the NHS and then there are some not so amazing people in the NHS. There are some wonderful, you know, Florence Nightingale nurses, and then there are some lazy nurses. You literally were kind of a social pariah. In my neighbourhood, if you didn't have your pots and pans out, you were a social pariah.
Could I ask something to you, Lynn, about the gesture itself of taking the knee? Because that comes from, really, the George Floyd stuff, I think, really, doesn't it?
It predates that.
It was the Colin Kaepernick thing, but then it really shot off, didn't it, with the George Floyd side of things. Is the gesture itself now a little bit tainted? Because, you know, people have looked at some elements of the Black Lives Matter movement, read their manifesto, disagree with that. There's been a bit of reputational damage to George Floyd himself, for example. Do you think maybe they need another gesture?
Yeah, I think, like I said just previously, if you want to take the knee, take the knee. However, I think it's the easy way out. I know there are multiple footballers, ex-footballers like Rio Ferdinand, like Sterling, who are actually on the ground, behind the scenes, doing work. But for many who's just taking the knee and not doing anything else with their millions, I just think, oh, yeah, I've taken the knee, I've done my job. No. Like previously stated, there are not enough coaches, there's not enough black managers. Let's see them put their money where their mouth is and actively do something instead of just getting down on your knee. Anyone can do that. It's easy.
I'll just wonder, it's that age-old debate and discussion, isn't it, between what is a role model? So just because you've got a public profile, I don't think makes you a role model. I certainly wouldn't want anyone to think I'm a role model. I'm quite obviously not, right? But I do have some form of public profile. Just by virtue of being able to kick a ball around, do you think that people have to look at you for some kind of life advice, which is essentially what this is?
I mean, it's not always a choice, is it? If you are a big football star, you are going to have to accept the fact that there are going to be young boys and girls and perhaps even adults that look up to you for guidance as a role model. And I think that just comes as part of the job. I think what we're kind of missing here is we've just forgotten this good old sense of British live and let live. If people want to take the knee, let them take the knee. If people don't want to take the knee, let them not take the knee. If people hate it, that's all right, but just leave everyone to their own business and let's not all get so upset about it when someone just gets down on a knee on a football pitch.
You know what, though, Emma? For me, it's a series of different things that seem to happen before football matches, right? Before, it just used to be, right, kick off. I mean,
kick off.
A bit of Keane and Vieira in the tunnel if we were lucky. A bit of spicy action before the start of the game. Go out, referee blows his whistle, actual football. And then now it seems to be taking the knee. There'll be some kind of charity procession. Someone that no one's ever heard of might have died, so we'll give them a round of applause for half an hour. There'll be possibly something involving a rainbow flag or rainbow laces. And then eventually, we'll see some football. And just, come on, people just want to watch the footy, don't they?
Exactly. I do think there's a lot of this, empty virtue signalling nonsense. And I think there's a lot of sitting through things, clapping away, when actually what you want is you want your beer, you want your pie, and you want to see the football.
I want my overpriced
And you want your team to win. Come on, Liverpool.
I want to go to Old Trafford and pay £9.50 for a chicken balti pie. Anyway, right, all of you, thank you very much.
I want to pay
right, we've got the papers at 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction, yes. But next, tonight's newsmaker is political YouTuber and commentator. It is Maya Tuesday, who will be delving into this shocking footage of an autistic girl being arrested for calling a police officer a lesbian and the ongoing junior doctors' strike. Where do you stand on that? Is it possible to hold two views at once when it comes to the doctors' strike? That, yes, they should be paid a bit more. B, if they are striking, they are actively choosing to kill people. So, yes, is it possible to have both of those views at the same time? See you in a tick.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Two big topics to get through here, both of which have really got people talking. Shocking footage has emerged on TikTok of a young autistic girl being arrested by a gang of police officers for allegedly implying that one of them may have looked a bit like a lesbian. Take a look.
What you clenching your fist? Go away from my teenage daughter.
What is up with you?
There is something wrong with you, mate. She didn't aim it at the police officer.
It's not homophobic remarks at my colleagues.
It's not a homophobic remark. She said, I think she's a lesbian like Nana.
If you want to bully people, you'll just get one of them badges there. That's what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Where'd it go? Where's this? Does it go to right under there?
She's autistic. She don't like people touching her.
Well,
she will have a meltdown.
What's your name?
She won't come out. She's got autism. I'm Lisa.
Talk to her so she can come out.
OK, so it's worth noting that young girl has since been released without charge, but it does beg the question, with all the crime that's actually going on in the country, what has happened to law and order in Britain? The other topic I'm going to be talking about is this. Junior doctors, yet another 4-day walkout over pay. The 5th strike since the row began. Now, this morning, Dr Robert Lawrenson of the British Medical Association said this. Now, this is important, OK? Listen to this. On the BBC's Today programme.
Absolutely. You would not accept the kind of deal that your Scottish members are thinking of accepting?
No, because the governments are very different. So the Scottish government, there's a basis to work forward and have a relationship and a working relationship to negotiate in the future. The government that we have today are hell-bent on using the rigged independent pay review bodies.
Right, so it's political, isn't it? It is political. I'm convinced it's not really about money. To dissect these two top topics is political YouTuber and commentator and friend of the channel. It is Mayor Toosey. Mayor, great to see you, mate. Thank you very much for coming on. Right, first things first, what are the police playing at in Yorkshire?
Well, thank you for having me, Patrick. It's slightly bizarre, but also very concerning on a deeper level, because when this news came out yesterday, and I talked about it on my channel, I thought, OK, let's wait for the wider context. What we knew from the video was quite clear, but now we have the context because the police have responded. They released a statement. It was simply because an autistic child, as you said, clearly just pointed out to her mother, saying that, oh, that police officer looks like my grandmother, who happens to be a lesbian. And now one police officer was triggered, and they got like about 10 police officers, like backup, to go and storm into the house and basically drag the girl out and arrest her. The problem I have with this story is that, firstly, the police, just overall policing in this country, which is a concern right now, where were they when there are actual crimes happening? You guys have been talking about the Oxford Street stuff today as well. Yeah. I know the police eventually got there, but you had 10 police officers on standby to go and storm into a house and drag a child out for a comment. And that's one thing. Second issue I have is that we always talk about the police leadership and the orders they get from above. And some police officers say, we're just following orders. So it's a lot of times the issue is actually with the regulations, guidelines they have. This time, clearly, it was a personal judgment or misjudgment by that police officer that got her colleagues to basically also freak out. So that also needs to be addressed, the individual police officers.
I think it speaks a lot, as you said there, too, if an officer is triggered about something. whether or not they should actually be fit to wear the uniform. I would also just like to say as well that there are some serious questions to be asked about why a 16-year-old autistic girl was actually drunk in Leeds city centre to begin with, but we can leave that there for now because I want to talk about the junior doctors. That's it. I want to talk about the junior doctors. Now, where are you on this? So they're out on strike again. They've come out, their co-chair, and said that the reason we have accepted basically the same deal in Scotland is because we prefer the SNP to the Tories. So I would argue there is a case to be made for the fact that junior doctors in this country, in England, might be more willing to let people die because they don't like the Tories. Is that too far?
Well, these are the sort of things we've been saying for years and years. And before they used to, the political level, call us saying that people like me, oh, you're just being a conspiracy theorist, saying they are political. The trade unions are not political. These groups are not political. But they actually said it themselves now. And the problem I have with this is that it divides the nation into the sort of debates we had in the 70s, that, you know, good guys and bad guys, they're pro-trade union or against trade unions. There shouldn't be a concept against the actual values of trade unionism, but the people who are running it, turning into a political organization. So these are political organizations because they go to every single protest that has nothing to do with their organization with other political flags. They got the Palestinian flag for some reason coming up. They got this and they got that. And you know they are political. This issue I have with this Scotland versus the rest of the UK is that, firstly, doctors are already getting paid more in England than Scotland. And so that's one issue that, you know, if they accepted the offer in Scotland, and one of the leaders of the trade union is already admitting that it's because we like this government, that it makes no sense.
What do you? It's worth noting this because I sometimes fall foul of this because I actually would pay junior doctors more, but I do also think that if you are a junior doctor and you go on strike when we've got a record backlog and a waiting list, that you are tantamount to helping to kill people, Mayor, very quickly.
Well, the problem is that the only solution is to completely reform the NHS. And the moment you say that, they say, well, you basically want people to die. You don't want proper healthcare. We're like, no. We actually want to make it better. You need to get rid of this religion that you created, actually make it a universal healthcare system, like in Western Europe and Northern Europe, and we go from there. If you turn everything into, well, this is just human rights, not political, it makes no sense.
No, exactly. And also complaining about a reduction in pay that they never actually had because they weren't doctors at the time. But anyway, Mayor, thank you very, very much. Mayor Toosey there, who's a political YouTuber, commentator, and indeed friend of the channel. Right, good stuff. OK, so I've got loads coming your way. And in fact, when I come back, we will be giving you a very, very sneaky peek of all of tomorrow's headlines today. Stay tuned.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst, and looking at the weekend, be summarised by sunshine and scattered showers, particularly heavy on Saturday. And looking at the bigger picture, we can see why this area of low pressure moves in for the weekend, increasing the wind strengths, increasing the risk of showers across the north and the west in particular. Out there through the rest of Friday evening, not too bad. There'll be some clear spells before dusk, and then overnight we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, which could be heavy at times. Temperatures generally a little lower than recent nights, so a little more comfortable for sleeping, but still 14 or 15 for many to start Saturday morning. Better the sunshine first thing across eastern parts of England, northeast Scotland. But these bands of rain slowly push their way eastwards through the day as the area of low pressure pushes in from the Atlantic. Some of this rain could be heavy and perhaps thundery at times across northern England, but there will be some sunny spells in between, and that will lift temperatures to around 23 degrees towards the southeast. Breezier conditions towards the northwest here, 20 or 21 as a maximum temperature. Into Sunday, low pressure still in charge. The winds do ease and there will be less showers around, but fairly cloudy picture. Some bright or sunny spells, a scattering of showers, and temperatures once again reaching the high teens to low 20s. Into the beginning of next week, it stays unsettled. Further rain on Monday, but signs of something drier and brighter by Tuesday.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Earlier on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:30. So, time now for a quick look at tomorrow's morning's newspapers, hot off the press. I have got for you the Daily Mail to start with. Trans row over women's wards. Pressure to change NHS guidance that says patients who temporarily identify as female can share single-sex spaces. We will be talking about that. Also, you can see at the top of the Mail there, Boris Johnson's latest column. He's treated us to a tale about newts and planning permission, a fat loss jab. Now we have his hot take on Elon Musk fighting Mark Zuckerberg in a cage fight, which may or may not be taking place at the actual Colosseum, by the way. I'm also going to whiz you through the Daily Telegraph now. We've got on the front, migrants taken off barge in Legionella scare. We've spoken quite a lot about that already. The Home Office branded incompetent as the vessel will be uninhabitable for weeks. I think that's the new line there, which is the length of time they expect this boat to not be able to carry migrants on. They're also talking about detached homeowners' mortgage bills passing £2,000 a month, and some bit about oil boilers, which I'm sorry, I cannot pretend to care about. The Daily Express, we're going in with the Express now. Doctors are striking to, quote, bring down Tories. We've just spoken a little bit about that. A doctors' union has been accused of trying to bring down the government by masterminding a wave of strikes. It's almost a story as old as time itself, isn't it, really? Unions trying trying to bring down a government, but I think they've actually been quite honest about it now. We're going over to The Guardian now. We have to. Asylum barge evacuated as deadly bacteria found. Yeah, fair enough. I can understand completely why they're leading on that. I did speak to a doctor earlier who did inform me that actually it's actually quite hard to catch Legionnaires, but still, not really the point. They've also got how to have great sex at every age. So no doubt we will be discussing that. A few tips out there. I said tips. Now, deadly bug on barge again. The Mirror going in big. More migrant chaos. Asylum seekers evacuate over Legionnaires' fears. Yeah, we know that. And I wonder what hard-hitting story the Daily Star will be coming to play with. That's right. Rise of the Sarnie psychos. Deviants take liberties with lunchtime feelings. Now, this is a story about how 45% of, as they call it now, wrong'uns admit tucking into cold baked bean sandwiches and other combinations. Right, OK, clearly that is, I mean, obviously front page news, isn't it? Let's turn now to my brilliant pundit. We are going to go in with Emma, I think. Let's start with the trans row over women's wards. So this is actually about shocking rules where, I'm just going to explain this. If I said I was a woman today but gave you a heads up that I wouldn't be a woman tomorrow, I still could go on your ward. So do you think it's time that stopped?
Yeah, I do. It's very unfashionable, but I think that we should keep single-sex wards, and the NHS has been failing and failing and failing on this. I don't know what the statistics are because I've forgotten them, but there are targets on single-sex wards and keeping women with women and men with men. The trans thing is a whole other level of complication. But when you go and visit elderly men, for example, my father was in hospital for a while before he died with, you know, you have these old men wandering around, their gowns flapping open, going to the lavatory in the middle of the night, all over the shop. Everybody, you know, you have your, you know, IVs hanging out. There's not much dignity on a hospital ward. I think that elderly people especially, but I think all people should have the dignity of being on a women's ward or a men's ward.
Your views, Lynn?
I agree. I'm actually disgusted by this, to be honest. And I actually think it's insulting to people who genuinely want to transition. Yeah. If you want to be a trans man or a trans woman, you're not going to decide, I fancy being a man on a Monday and a woman on a Wednesday. So I just think this is a complete mockery. I think the NHS is buying into a tiny, tiny percentage of people who would want to do that. And they're basically putting, you know, middle finger up to the rest of us.
Albie, so this has been unearthed. I'll just go into a bit more detail on this story. It's just landed in front of us. NHS guidance uncovered in a major audit by the Daily Mail means that transgender women can use facilities they wish, regardless of whether or not they have had surgery or legally changed sex. So this is proper feelings territory now. Yes. This is just feelings, right? Albie, do you think this should have been banned from the start?
It seems like strange guidance to me, but I just wonder how often it's actually ever been used and whether or not this is just guidance which has been conjured up, but actually how many situations are there where this has actually happened?
But even if there's one, I think that's a mockery to women as well, who, because it's about people who are part-time identify.
I would question that. I get what you're saying on that. It will be, I imagine, relatively difficult to get all of those facts, but I would question the type of person who would act on that, right? So if somebody was a full-time transgender individual, then I can see an element of logic behind that, right? If that's how you live your life. If you pick and choose, depending on what day of the week it is, and then you actively decide that you want to go into hospital and go on a woman's ward, for me, that would ring alarm bells.
No, I mean, I completely agree. Look, I think there's something in what Lynn has said, in that a lot of this, I've got girl mode and boy mode, as Eddie or Susan Izzard, Susie Izzard, rather.
Soon to be an MP, possibly.
I find that an insult both to men and
people
women,
who are
and
making a serious decision about their life.
There are people
who
are genuinely trans and they go through surgery and therapy in order to live the life that they want, not just change their mind every 5 minutes.
Let's whiz it on over to the Daily Telegraph now, and I'm going to lead with their lead, which is migrants taken off barge in Legionella scare. The line that I'm seeing here, which stood out to me, was it's going to be uninhabitable for weeks, they say. I'll just read you a couple of the top lines of this story. So the Home Office has been branded incompetent, yes, over the Bibby Stockholm barge fiasco, not least by me on this show as well, but it's emerged that the vessel will now be out of action 4 weeks following the discovery of bacteria in the water supply, and all 39 asylum seekers living were evacuated and taken back to hotels. So that's where we are. Senior MPs in the Conservative Party are raising questions about the people in charge of this. An angle that we've not touched on so far, Emma, is whether or not anyone who had any hand in supplying this barge at a political level should just be sacked now because of the total incompetence.
Well, I just have so many questions. You say you spoke to a doctor earlier who says actually Legionnaires' disease is not that transmissible. I'm wondering, are people tested? Are they bringing any communicable diseases over from wherever they've arrived from? Are we testing the water supply? I mean, I know these are all irrelevant, but I mean, are we testing the water supplies in all of their hostels and hotels where they're being put up in alternative accommodation? I just don't know.
OK, let's explore that. Is this actually a good... I'm spinning it a bit. Is this actually a good news story for the government? We've tested things straight away. We've acted on it straight away. I can imagine a load of other situations. You make a good point. Does every single Holiday Inn have the water tested for Legionnaires every day of the week?
No, but my question, following on from you saying there's loads of questions, is why they have, floated this idea or this way of dealing with things by going on the barge. Why are they only testing it literally few days before people are going to be on the boat?
Well, that's the incompetence, Albie, isn't it? And that is why I think now more so than ever we have to look at who the idiots really are here and whether or not they should be...
Or is it a coincidence?
Go on, expand on that. Go on.
Yes, OK, they should have tested it before, but it just seems really, really convenient.
A lot of people are saying this online.
Not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but...
You do.
No, I'm just
a lot of people are saying...
Convenient.
I don't look... In politics, I think it's normally cock-up rather than conspiracy. That's all.
I don't think there's been Conservative MPs pumping Legionnaires.
Or lefty plumbers.
Some of us are thinking it, let's be honest.
Looking at the way...
people are thinking it.
Looking at the way this government has handled things over the last couple of years...
utter incompetence.
I don't think they are clever enough to come up with a plan...
Not them.
Like this
Maybe the other.
What, to pay millions for this huge barge and then render it completely and then screw it up?
It's cock-up, not conspiracy. And no, to answer your question, it's not a good news story. It's a terrible news story. This was Stop the Boats Week. Not a single boat has been stopped.
Loads have come in, by the way. Loads have come in.
The highest.
That is the thing of it. Look, we've done a lot on the barge and everything. We'll probably be returning to that a little bit. Where to go next? So I'm going to go to the Express. Doctors are striking to, quote, bring down the Tories. I'll read you again a couple of the headlines here in front of me. A doctors' union has been accused of trying to bring down the government. The hugely damaging walkouts by junior doctors have cost the NHS around £1 billion this year. Ministers urged the British Medical Association to halt its latest strike, the fifth so far, amid growing acrimony over the long-standing pay dispute. Emma, we've got people now being diagnosed with cancer, unfortunately, potentially survivable, definitely at least treatable, who are now dying as a result of this backlog, OK? Go on.
I'm being attacked by the GBNews fly, sorry.
Yes, it's everywhere.
And it's not just those really, really serious cases, people whose chemo is being put back, people whose diet, it's old people living in pain with a hip replacement that's been put off again and again and again. It's actually people's lives. Do doctors want to help people or not? No one's being paid enough at the moment. Everybody's suffering. I just think, what are doctors and nurses doing?
I get very angry about this, and sometimes I express myself poorly, because I do think that doctors who go on strike are in a roundabout way or directly actually leading to people dying. And I think that is morally unconscionable. Get a different job if you don't want people's lives to be in your hand. I do also think we should pay them a bit more. Yeah. Right? I do think it's possible to hold both those views at the same time. Should they be banned from striking?
I don't think banned, but I just find it quite strange that we're not actually looking at the NHS on a whole as opposed to just always attacking the government. I think we need to get the auditors in the NHS, find out where a lot of the wastage in terms of money is going. And I think also the doctors need to take a different approach and start looking within. They waste billions every year, the NHS. Somehow, the government need to keep on finding money, our taxpayers' money.
I think what's interesting is a lot of these doctors are moving over to Australia, which, of course, has a different healthcare system, a social insurance system, where there is both public sector and private sector involvement. There's better wages for the doctors, better healthcare outcomes for the patients, but they're dead against that kind of system in the United Kingdom.
Would you ban them from striking?
No, I wouldn't ban them from striking.
Is that because you don't like banning things, generally?
Generally speaking, I don't like banning things, and it's a right of people to withdraw their labour.
OK, yeah, and that's the argument against banning them from going on strike, isn't it? We don't let the police and our armed forces strike, which is interesting because in the latest round of pay rises, I think the armed forces and the police got the lower offer out of things like teachers, nurses and someone else as well, or maybe there is a point to be had to that. Would you ban them?
No, I wouldn't ban them from striking. I agree with the others that it is a human right. But what's really depressing about this is it's actually not even headline news that this is the beginning of another 4-day strike. We've got so used to strikes in this country. Junior doctors, that's a huge swathe of the workforce.
Really interesting was this morning, I think it was on a BBC radio station, there was a doctor from one of the unions who was saying that in Scotland they wouldn't strike because it's a different government, but in England, because it was a Conservative government, they would be striking. So they want to... It's political.
It's naked politics. It's naked politics. And the offer that they got in Scotland was basically the same as what's being offered here, and they are paid, on average, less in Scotland than what they are paid in England, right? But they accepted that because that was the SNP, possibly soon to be Labour. We'll have to wait and see. And so that was fine. But if the Tories offer them that, then they'll strike and people walk out. And I just wonder if you are a patient out there right now or you know a loved one who's in a desperate situation, does that make you feel a little bit wronged, really? The idea that if we had Labour in charge in this country now and they'd given the junior doctors the exact same offer, there is every chance that the doctors would not be on strike. I think that's a bit rough.
Starmer even said that what they're asking for is they're asking for...
Yeah.
But also, Patrick, I don't...
35%. What planet are they living on?
You don't need to be a patient to be angry about that. I mean, just listening to you, I'm fuming.
Yeah.
It's out of order.
I get that a lot, though, to be fair. I do tend to rebel-rouse. Just before I move on to the Daily Star, because this ties in, actually, we did ask a poll, OK, you lovely lot on Twitter, should doctors be banned from striking? So 76% of you said yes, they should. 23% of you said no, they shouldn't. I've done that a bit early because we came onto that story and it's relevant, but I will now whiz us onto the fantastic headline in the Daily Star, which is the rise of the Sani psychos. Yeah, if they're not banging on about seagulls and UFOs,
always
it's Sani psychos. Yeah, psycho, strong, isn't it? Deviants, it's full of it, this, take liberties with lunchtime fillings. I will read you what, frankly, very little substance there is to this story. The Earl of Sandwich will be spinning in his grave. 45% of wrong'uns admit tucking in to cold baked beans and other unholy Sani combos. They go on to call these people filthy beasts, filling sandwiches with beans. Can I just ask, a bean sandwich? Am I a beast? A bean sandwich? I mean, I'll normally slap a bit of bacon in there, but I don't think that's wrong, is it?
Right, baked beans on toast, toast hot, that's fine, right? Why would you put cold baked beans, which, by the way, I love, cold baked beans on the way, why would you put cold baked beans into a sarnie? That would make it all soggy.
You like cold baked beans?
I like cold baked beans out of the tin.
With what? But
out of the tin. That's really nice.
Maybe this is a better front page than I gave it credit for. Albie, you wouldn't be seeing Deb with a plate of cold beans, would you?
No.
Not Albie, no.
But you also wouldn't eat the carbs of a sandwich.
You would only have a filet tartare steak at the Garrick.
I like a good baked bean. You know, baked beans on toast.
Bean. Yeah.
Not beans on a cold...
In a sandwich.
Okay.
But that's like crisps. That's
it
like
sounds very
crisps in a sandwich.
hungover.
All right, I think we can all agree that's enough about that. Right, OK, so coming up, more from the papers next. We have got the Times. That's the front page we've not given you yet, so stay tuned for that. We usually save the best till last. And that is also going to be followed by our headline heroes and back page zeros. And I want yours. GBViews at gbnews.com. See you in a tick.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back. Quick view now. Ali's been on. Ali says, I've lost all respect for doctors. They are only in it for the money. Interesting, controversial view, Ali, but a lot of people do think that. There was another fascinating one there as well about making taking the knee before football matches more interesting, which is just play the hokey-cokey theme tune over the top of it. Yeah, but anyway, still with me are my pundits, author and journalist Emma Wolf, political and social commentator Lynn May, and GB News contributor Albie Conan. Now, the front page that we hadn't given you yet, I now have. It's The Times, which I think for a lot of people might argue usually has some of the best stories. Good one. Students to start, this is university students, to start term in hotels or bunk beds. Universities unable to guarantee accommodation. It's that time of year where students are going to start going to university. Students face a battle for housing, with universities refusing to guarantee accommodation or offering them rooms in different cities. So, yeah, there you go. You've gone to Sheffield, but you were based in Glasgow. This is, according to The Times, of course, many universities are promising to provide accommodation only to students who made them their first choice. School leavers are being advised to sort out accommodation quickly after A-levels on Thursday. Look, this just seems a bit rum. Emma, I'll start with you. I mean, a university's taking the mick again. Saddle yourself with a lifetime of debt to go and do media management at Bath Spa University, underwater basket weaving at somewhere like Norwich Town, and then you stay in a Premier Inn.
Yeah, no, this is really rubbish. And when you're a student, when you're starting university, it's actually really important where you're living, you know, just sorting out your digs, making sure that you're near, whether you're near your college, that you're with other students. It's really, really unfair.
I don't understand why this is the case. What's happened to the spaces? I'm going to assume that the second years are now staying because a lot of landlords are selling up the properties. And this is a failure, I think, because of the government, because there's just no money in it and they've turned their back on landlords.
It is interesting if this is just yet another example of the housing crisis.
Yep.
Well, of course, but I mean, let's look
Indirectly.
here. Bristol University is saying it's offering university accommodations to students in Wales. I mean, how does that work? How are they going to get from across the Severn Estuary to Bristol?
I think, yeah, exactly that. Well, they'll do it over Zoom, won't they? Well, this is what happened.
What university experience is that?
I had that. I had that over lockdown. I tried to do a law conversion, and I went into the university once, did it all over Zoom. All the exams were open book. It was ridiculous. I was
That's absolutely ridiculous, isn't it?
I was 3 marks off at first.
You better have
I did. Yeah, 3 marks
He's
off
going
at first.
to tell everyone that.
For doing
I was 3
absolutely
marks.
naff all. Right, anyway, that's enough about my exceptional academic career. We've got time for Headline Heroes and Backpage Zeros. Emma, Headline Hero?
Hero. OK, well, my hero was Wilco.
No, Backpage Zero. I've jumped the gun. Go, do it.
Do you want my zero? All right, Nadine Dorries. We can do it together because we both chose Nadine.
Dorries.
Well, she announced her intention to resign 9 weeks ago. Hasn't resigned. Still on full pay, I believe. Has written a book. Has started presenting her TV show in the time. She literally does not maintain a constituency surgery. She doesn't even pretend to be an MP.
So you think she's on the take, basically? But
she is on the take. She needs to go.
Go on.
Mine is Biden. He's asked for a further $24 billion from Congress. Guess what for?
Yeah.
Ukraine.
Classic. Absolute classic. Well, let's hope it goes to Ukraine and not to Hunter. We now, I believe, we do the heroes. I will get the premise of this show one day. Albie.
So everyone irritated me so much this week. I could think of no one else to give my headline hero to other than yours truly.
What?
Patrick Christie.
What?
Because of the amazing transformation that you have been on since the time that I've known you. I mean, look at you in that picture.
Oh, thank
and then
you.
Look at you now.
Oh,
it's just so impressive to see. You are my headline hero this week.
Well, thank you very much, Albie. I had no idea that was coming.
Patrick naked?
Oh, now all of a sudden I look like I put it all back up. I'll be going to the gym tomorrow. Right, go on.
Mine's
me as well. Thank you very much. OK, no, go on.
No, mine's 8-year-old boy, double amputee, Tony Hudgell, who raised $19,000 for a summit that he climbed. And I just think that's amazing because, especially when we're faced with obesity, so many kids stuck to their iPad, he has done something magnificent.
I mean, you've mugged me right off there, right? Because all I did was lose some weight, and then you pop up with a child double amputee who's raised a load of money for charity and climbed a mountain. Thank you very much.
Well, I've got an even better one to trump you. A hardware store that no one wanted to shop in. Okay. Like Albie, I couldn't find anyone I respected or even vaguely admired or anything this week. Not even Patrick for losing the lard. So mine was Wilco. But just like Woolworths, C&A, R Price, HMV.
Well, why is that a good thing?
Debenhams. What's happening? I'm confused.
No. These are all the much-beloved stores that none of us could be bothered to shop in that we've lost. So I just thought, let's take the knee for Wilco.
Take the knee for Wilco.
It's too late.
Wow.
Why not?
OK, well, can I just say a massive, monumental thank you to all of you. I have really, really, really enjoyed this particular show, filling in for the wonderful Mark Dolan. I would like to thank all of my gorgeous and wonderful viewers and listeners as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. There is, as you can see, rather a lot to get through on all of these front pages, and who better to do it than the wonderful cast and crew of Headliners, which is up next. I hope that you stick around for that. I also hope that you have an absolutely plumbing lovely weekend. I'll be seeing you on Monday, yes. I forgot what day of the week it is then, at 3 p.m. Thank you very much, everybody. Keep your emails coming in thick and fast as well. GBViews and GBnews.com. Headliners will be up next. It's going to be about deadly bugs on barges, asylum barges being evacuated, our doctors trying to bring down the government and kill people while they're at it, and maybe there will even be some stuff about whether or not you're a filthy, stinking deviant if you put baked beans in a sandwich. It really is all go. Peace out.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Greg Dewhurst, and looking at the weekend, be summarised by sunshine and scattered showers, particularly heavy on Saturday. And looking at the bigger picture, we can see why this area of low pressure moves in for the weekend, increasing the wind strengths, increasing the risk of showers across the north and the west in particular. Out there through the rest of Friday evening, not too bad. There'll be some clear spells before dusk, and then overnight we'll see some outbreaks of rain pushing in across parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, which could be heavy at times. Temperatures generally